The CEO, displaying a racist attitude, publicly humiliated a young black woman based on her skin color. However, 2 hours later, he experienced the surprising repercussions of his actions. Michael Davidson, the CEO of Davidson Industries, held a meeting with potential clients that morning. As he entered the conference room with his customary swagger, a hush fell over the room. All eyes were on him, filled with a mix of respect and a touch of fear. Recognizing Michael as an influential figure, the attendees, a diverse group of potential clients and business partners, understood the significance of securing a deal with Davidson Industries, one of the city's largest trading companies. Aware of his influence, Michael felt a sense of superiority, understanding that the people in the room needed him more than he needed them. Taking his place at the head of the table, he surveyed the room with his piercing blue eyes and noticed something that struck him as odd. Seated a few spaces away was a smartly dressed young lady. Michael's frown was not directed at her gender or age, but rather because she was the only black person in the room. Puzzled by her presence and disapproving of her inclusion in such a crucial meeting, Michael turned his condescending gaze away from her and proceeded with the meeting. He addressed the room with an air of superiority, speaking loudly and confidently, as if he possessed all the knowledge. Ignoring the concerns of potential clients and business partners, he projected an arrogant demeanor, making it clear that he considered himself the boss, and everyone else was expected to comply. The atmosphere grew tense as Michael dominated the meeting. But amid the discomfort, Rachel Thompson, the young lady a few seats away from him, remained composed. An exceptionally talented and intelligent analyst, Rachel was accustomed to being overlooked and underestimated. Michael's actions didn't faze her. Today's meeting held particular importance for her, as she aimed to make a positive impression on behalf of her company and secure a deal with Davidson Industries. As Michael continued to speak, Rachel maintained her composure outwardly, but internally, she felt a growing nervousness. Despite her numerous career achievements, she couldn't help but perceive them as insignificant compared to the accomplishments of individuals like Michael. While she held great respect for the CEO's successes, disappointment crept in as Michael's behavior unfolded. Rather than providing clear answers to the client's questions about how his company could collaborate effectively, Michael responded in a condescending manner. He chose to boast about his trading model and his company's 7-year track record. Rachel, growing increasingly irritated, knew that her company desired the deal, but she needed Michael to approach the negotiation reasonably. In an attempt to redirect the discussion, Rachel posed a question that caught Michael off guard. She inquired about the future sustainability of his business model over the next few years. Despite the profitability of Michael's trading model, Rachel had concerns about its long-term viability. Michael, feeling insulted by Rachel's question, questioned her qualifications and wondered who she was to challenge the model he had developed. Throughout the meeting, he had attempted to dismiss her presence, but he could no longer ignore her. In a mocking tone, Michael asked about the black community college she attended, suggesting that she lacked the intelligence to question his business model. Rachel, taken aback by the question, responded that she had attended the University of Chicago, a renowned institution. However, Michael remained unimpressed and continued to question her qualifications, insinuating that she had only reached her current position to fulfill diversity quotas. Rachel was surprised by Michael's disparaging remarks. However, it was the racist remarks that ensued that left Rachel stunned. Michael's disdain for her skin color became glaringly evident as he bluntly told her that she lacked the intellectual capacity to contribute to the discussion. According to him, people of her race were supposedly not intelligent enough to understand such matters. A statement delivered with arrogant assurance when Rachel attempted to speak up once more. Michael shut her down with a tone dripping with superiority. He asked her to look around the room and questioned if she saw anyone who looked like her, implying that her opinion was unnecessary, and she should keep quiet. The room fell into an uneasy silence, tension escalating with each derogatory comment, known for his arrogance and dominance. Michael's behavior went beyond shocking and reached a level of cruelty. Rachel, feeling stunned and disgraced, likened the experience to being punched in the gut. She struggled to comprehend that someone in such a powerful position would openly display such racism. An experience she had never encountered before, despite the humiliation and anger coursing through her. Rachel knew she couldn't afford to lose her composure. She took a deep breath, attempting to maintain her dignity. Other attendees in the room became visibly uncomfortable with Michael's behavior, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact with him. They recognized that he had crossed a line but felt unsure about how to address the situation. Michael, seemingly unfazed by the discomfort he caused, looked around the room with a widening smirk. Observing that no one was willing to challenge him, he leaned back in his chair and offered an apology for his harsh words. However, he couldn't resist adding a final racist remark, stating that someone had to teach monkeys like Rachel their place. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, unable to believe what she had just heard. Anger surged through her veins as she felt the heat rising in her cheeks. This last insult became the breaking point for Rachel. Pushing her chair back, she stood up, her gaze steady as she addressed the room. "Thank you for your time," Rachel said in a firm voice, giving Michael a cold, hard look. Without sparing him another glance, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. As she passed by Michael, he didn't bother to look up at her, shaking her head in disgust. Rachel exited the building, leaving the meeting room in a state of shock and disbelief. While Rachel's departure made a strong impression on everyone present, Michael remained smugly satisfied, believing that he had put Rachel in her place and demonstrated his superiority. He looked around the table. The expressions of those who remained were a mix of discomfort and unease, but Michael interpreted their reactions as awe and submission. Settling back in his chair, a self-satisfied grin played on his lips. In his perception, the meeting had showcased his power and control over those he deemed beneath him. After the meeting concluded, Michael returned to his office, reveling in the sense of authority he believed he had upheld. He relished the idea of being a powerful CEO intolerant of opposition. This mindset stemmed from his deeply ingrained belief in his own superiority, reinforced by the success, wealth, power, and social status he had accumulated over the years. Michael was prejudiced and enjoyed treating people of color with disdain. However, beneath Michael's pride and ego, all was not well. His company faced financial difficulties, and recent market challenges had exposed weaknesses in his cherished business model. Michael was on the verge of losing everything he had worked hard to build. Desperate for a lifeline, he needed a major deal to bring much-needed capital into his struggling enterprise. The partnerships discussed in the previous meeting were not sufficient. Michael had set his sights on a more significant prize, a partnership with Miller Trading, the biggest trading company on the Western Seaboard. None of the companies discussed in the previous meeting mattered to Michael as much as securing a deal with Miller Trading. Roger Miller, the CEO of Miller Trading, was a titan in the industry, and Michael viewed his achievements as overwhelming, considering Miller Trading as a role model. After months of effort, luck finally smiled on Michael just last week when Roger Miller agreed to meet with him later that afternoon. Michael pinned his hopes on this meeting, seeing it as the potential rescue for his business from imminent collapse under financial pressure. Determined to make the deal happen, He was unaware that the repercussions of his actions in the earlier meeting were about to unfold in an unexpected way. 2 hours later, Michael was engrossed in going over business charts. Feeling satisfied with himself after the previous meeting, believing that he had put everyone in their place. Suddenly, his phone rang. And Michael's heart skipped a beat when he saw the caller ID displaying Roger Miller's name. Although they had a meeting scheduled for later in the afternoon, Roger was calling earlier than expected with steady hands. Michael answered the call, attempting to maintain his usual confidence. However, the words that followed from the other end were far from what he expected. Roger's voice boomed with both a father's anguish and a businessman's fury as he accused Michael of humiliating his daughter in front of everyone. Shocked and confused, Michael didn't understand what Roger meant. He had been looking forward to the meeting to secure the deal that could save his company. Instead, he was confronted with shocking revelations. That's when Roger dropped the bomb. The revelation hit Michael hard. Rachel Thompson was Roger Miller's daughter. For a moment, he was left speechless, unable to comprehend that the same young black woman he had disgraced at the meeting just 2 hours ago was the daughter of Roger Miller, the powerful CEO of Miller Trading. It suddenly made sense that Roger had sent Rachel, his adopted daughter, to inquire about Michael's business model at the previous meeting before meeting with Michael himself in the afternoon. The truth of the situation weighed on Michael like a ton of bricks. Roger informed Michael that he would be ending all business relations with his company immediately. Just like that, Michael lost a potential partner and a significant client. A heavy fog descended over Michael as he realized that he had not only ruined the deal but also tarnished his reputation in the eyes of one of the most influential figures in the business world. The consequences of his actions were dire. If news got out that Roger Miller had declined the deal, other clients might assume that he had noticed something wrong with Michael's business model, leading them to avoid Michael's company. Without those clients, Michael's company would collapse in weeks. The gravity of his mistake hit Michael, and he regretted the arrogance and prejudice that had cost him more than he could have anticipated. As the call with Roger ended, Michael was shocked and horrified. He knew he had made a huge mistake and was in serious trouble. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he quickly obtained Rachel's number from his receptionist and dialed it, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to apologize and make things right before it was too late. However, each attempt went to voicemail, and Michael left message after message, stumbling over his apologies and desperate for forgiveness. When he finally reached Rachel, her voice was cold and distant. She was not interested in hearing his excuses or his apology. You're not expressing remorse for what she mentioned, she told him, her tone infused with both disappointment and anger. You're only apologetic because you were exposed. Her words sliced through him like a knife, and he keenly sensed the burden of his arrogance and prejudice pressing down on him. The line fell silent, leaving Michael in a state of shock and defeat. He realized he had forfeited her trust, her respect, and along with it, the largest client his company had ever secured. Rachel understood that Michael's behavior would be etched in her memory. An unforgettable betrayal. It had been a humiliating and degrading experience, but it also imparted a valuable lesson. She discovered that she couldn't allow anyone to make her feel inferior, regardless of their race or position. Moreover, she realized her own strength to stand up for herself even in the face of adversity. She vowed never to tolerate such mistreatment again. Over the next few weeks, Michael's life and business spiraled into chaos. Despite his efforts to salvage the company, he faced rejection from partners and clients alike. The stain on his actions had spread far and wide, causing clients to sever ties. Even those indifferent to his racism distanced themselves from a company rapidly losing clients, with too many offended people and little support. Michael confronted the painful reality that his company was on the verge of collapse, forced to face the consequences of his arrogance and prejudice. Michael made the difficult decision to lay off his employees and close down the business he had painstakingly built. As he cleared out of his office, a profound sense of loss and regret enveloped him. His misguided beliefs had clouded his judgment, blinding him to the true value of genuine connections. In the end, arrogance had cost him everything: his company, reputation, and the respect of those he cared about. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. After watching this story, how do you feel? Let's continue. Matthew decided to adopt 6 orphan girls from Africa and brought them to England. Despite facing criticism from many of his close friends and relatives who deemed his decision as eccentric, Matthew persevered. 2 decades later, the 6 girls repaid Matthew in a surprising manner. The scene on the flight to London was quite unique, with a white man and 6 black girls seated together. At first glance, observers might have thought it was a white teacher accompanied by his 6 African students on an excursion to London. However, a closer look revealed a stronger connection between the man and the girls, surpassing the typical teacher-student bond. Notably, the youngest girl, approximately 3 years old, leaned her head on the man's lap while he gently patted her hair. The other 5 girls were fully engaged, taking turns peering out of the plane's window, clearly captivated by their first flight experience. Enthusiastically, 2 of the girls bombarded the man with endless questions about the sky, please, and, of course, London. The man responded with humor, answering their inquiries in a light-hearted manner that elicited hearty laughter from the girls. The man, known as Matthew, was on a journey to London with his newly adopted daughters. Matthew, a London native since childhood, had harbored a lifelong dream of a job that would allow him to travel the world and aid those in need. To fulfill this aspiration, he pursued studies in international relations in college and graduated with first-class honors. Soon after completing his education, Matthew found himself working for the World Food Programme, WFP, a UN agency dedicated to delivering food and relief materials to civilians in conflict zones globally. Thrilled to have secured his dream job, Matthew's joy was palpable. However, his excitement was soon met with a challenging reality. Within 3 months of his employment, the WFP assigned Matthew to his inaugural mission abroad. His destination was a country in the Horn of Africa embroiled in a bloody civil war. Upon arriving in the war-torn African nation, Matthew encountered a situation far more intense than he had anticipated. The country was engulfed in fierce conflict, with warring factions locked in intense battles around the airport. The very moment Matthew set foot in the country, he experienced a literal baptism of fire. The airport, surrounded by the chaos of war, forced Matthew and his colleagues to seek cover on the runway for hours, shielding themselves from bullets whizzing overhead. It was an arduous experience, but they eventually managed to reach their designated hotel safely. The following morning, Matthew, along with his colleagues, embarked on a mission to deliver life-saving food and medical supplies to refugees in a camp. The convoy, guarded by heavily armed UN peacekeeping forces, made its way through the streets marked by the grim sight of dead bodies strewn everywhere. Upon reaching the camp, the scene resembled a famine described in biblical accounts. Most refugees were clad in rags, on the brink of starvation. The camp, lacking proper sanitation, emitted an unbearable odor. Despite the challenges, the vital food supplies provided by the WFP sustained the refugees, leading to a situation where thousands of people's bodily excrements added to the overwhelming stench. In fact, the smell was so nauseating that Matthew experienced severe vomiting. As Matthew navigated through the camp, he encountered a heart-wrenching scene. On the dusty ground, 6 young girls were crying profusely over their mother's lifeless body. Matthew immediately approached the girls and, bending down, asked the visibly eldest one about the circumstances surrounding their mother's demise. Ameta tearfully recounted to Matthew the tragic events that had unfolded. Their mother had succumbed to cholera earlier that morning. And just a week before, their father had fallen victim to rebel fighters. Overwhelmed with compassion for the girls, Matthew did his best to console them. Subsequently, he took them to a sizable medical tent in the camp operated by the WFP, entrusting their care to the chief nurse. Before parting, he handed the girls packets of English chocolates, cookies, and candies, promising to return the next day, true to his word. Matthew reappeared at the medical tent the following day. Aminata, the eldest among the girls who spoke English fluently, shared the names and ages of her sisters, Ayana, 10, Abba, 7, Belis, 5, Alidas, 4, and Etanesh, 3. For the next 6 months, as Matthew continued his work in the country, he visited the girls regularly, bringing them treats and strengthening the bond between them. As fate would have it, the war abruptly ended with a peace treaty brokered by the UN. With the conclusion of his mission, Matthew faced the inevitable departure from the country. During his planned last visit before leaving, he informed Ameta that he would be departing in 3 days. Holding back tears, Ameta conveyed Matthew's farewell message to her sisters. The news triggered an outburst of sorrow, and the 5 girls erupted into a powerful, collective cry. Amin quickly joined in the emotional scene, followed by Aliash and Etanesh, both hugging Matthew tightly as if attempting to prevent his departure. The remaining 4 girls knelt before Matthew, earnestly begging him to take them with him. Amidst loud cries, the heart-wrenching plea left tears rolling down Matthew's cheeks. Something within him melted, and he made a solemn vow to care for these 6 girls forever, returning the next day with a resolute decision. Matthew asked Amin to convey to her sisters that he would take them with him. Aminata explained the plan, and the girls' tears transformed into instant joy. 2 days later, Matthew, after seeking the chief nurse's assurance to look after the girls in his absence, left for London to initiate the complex adoption process during Matthew's absence. The girls, not seeing him for weeks, cried, fearing abandonment. The chief nurse, however, reassured them that Matthew had left to prepare the way for their future. Ameta, with a strong intuition, believed that Matthew would never abandon them, which helped convince her sisters. Back in London, Matthew faced unexpected challenges from his relatives upon his return with the 6 girls. Some questioned his sanity, and even his mother, Beatrice, was furious at the prospect of welcoming not just 1 or 2, but 6 girls. She sarcastically remarked if he intended to start an all-black female football team. Matthew chose to ignore his mother's objections for the 6 girls. London was an entirely new and overwhelming experience. The fast-paced lifestyle, bitter cold, snow, and cultural differences posed a considerable shock. Despite the challenges, Matthew remained a constant guiding presence for them. The girls gradually adapted to life in London under Matthew's guidance, overcoming the disorientation and cultural contrasts. 5 years later, the 35-year-old Matthew found himself deeply in love with a 28-year-old lady named Susan. Susan, in Matthew's eyes, was the most beautiful woman he had ever encountered in his entire life. They first met at a party and instantly connected. As time passed, their relationship only grew stronger, however. Matthew harbored a secret from Susan throughout their time together. He had 6 adopted girls. A fact he had yet to disclose to Susan. Unsure of how she would react to this revelation. Whenever Susan suggested visiting Matthew at his house, he always came up with excuses. And as a result, they usually met at her place or elsewhere. Around 6 months later, Matthew decided to take a significant step and propose to Susan. Much to his delight, Susan joyfully accepted the proposal. 2 weeks after this momentous occasion, Matthew felt that the time had come to share the truth about his adopted girls with Susan. He invited her over to his house on a Sunday afternoon for lunch. Fully aware that all 6 girls would be there, Susan agreed eagerly. And on the following Sunday, she arrived an hour early. As Matthew opened the door, Susan walked in and was taken aback to see 6 black girls watching TV and sharing laughter in the sitting room. The girls warmly greeted Susan, who responded with equal warmth. Turning to Matthew, Susan said, "You didn't tell me that your neighbor's kids were coming over too." Despite the interruption, Matthew continued with a smile, introducing Susan to his 6 adopted angels: Aminata, Abiba, Ayana, Balis, Ali, and himself. However, Susan, rudely cutting him off, questioned if it was some kind of joke. Matthew, maintaining a serious tone, assured Susan that he wasn't kidding. He explained that he had adopted the 6 children during his time in Africa and had brought them with him. Susan, taken aback, couldn't hide her surprise. Stunned beyond words, Susan stood there, gazing at Matthew, then at the girls, and back to Matthew for what felt like ages. When Susan finally regained her composure, she firmly stated that we're not having this conversation here. Matthew, not in front of these kids. With that, she stormed out of the house, leaving Matthew devastated, glancing at the girls, who were staring at him with curiosity. Matthew forced a smile and jokingly reassured them. "Don't worry, girls. That's just how all ladies in this country behave. Maybe I'll go down to Africa tomorrow and find myself a good wife." The girls burst into hearty laughter, diverting their attention back to the TV. That night, Matthew found it impossible to sleep. Susan's shocking reaction lingered in his thoughts. Unable to shake off the turmoil, he dialed Susan's number repeatedly, hearing the phone ring each time but receiving no answer. The unanswered calls only added to Matthew's distress. Barely 10 minutes later, Matthew's phone bleeped with an incoming text message from Susan. Anxiously, he opened the text, confirming it was indeed from her. The message conveyed Susan's deep disappointment in Matthew for hiding such a significant aspect of his life. Susan expressed her unwillingness to take on the responsibility of being a stepmother to 6 girls and presented Matthew with a difficult choice. The text read, "Dearest Matthew, I honestly feel so disappointed in you for hiding something like this from me all this while. But you know what, Matthew? Keeping it a secret doesn't even change anything because I'm not ready or willing to take on the responsibility of being a stepmother to 6 girls. So, you have to make a choice here. Matthew, either you take those girls to an orphanage where they rightfully belong, or you lose me forever. I hope you make the right decision." Matthew, after reading the message, felt a mixture of anguish and anger. Anguish because he was on the brink of losing the only woman he ever loved, and anger at Susan's suggestion that he should take his beloved girls to an orphanage, claiming it to be their rightful place. After everything he had been through with the girls, after the deep love they shared, Matthew found it impossible to sacrifice his beloved daughters. 2 days later, Matthew texted Susan, expressing his unwavering commitment to his girls. He made it clear that no matter what. He wouldn't abandon them. Susan never replied. But Matthew understood the message. The breakup left him truly heartbroken. And to add to the pain, he lost his UN job 5 months later due to staff downsizing. Fortunately, Matthew's exceptional qualifications secured him a new job in a political consultancy and lobby firm. However, the pay was significantly less than his previous UN job. To make ends meet, Matthew took on another job as a taxi driver. Balancing 2 jobs was tough. But he persisted to ensure he could provide the best care for his beloved girls. Time passed. And it had been 20 years since Matthew adopted the 6 girls. Despite the challenges, Matthew persevered. And all the girls were thriving in their respective careers. 5 of them had successful careers in law, architecture, finance, fashion, and the oil industry. 2 had started their own families. And the youngest, Itanesh, was still in college. Despite the hardships, Matthew's dedication had paid off. And his girls were doing well. The bond between Matthew and his 6 girls remained as strong as ever. However, Matthew suddenly fell terribly sick and was promptly hospitalized. After thorough examinations, doctors diagnosed him with end-stage kidney failure. And Matthew urgently needed a kidney transplant to survive beyond 3 months initially. Matthew concealed the true cause of his sickness from his daughters, who were devotedly visiting him in the hospital. He repeatedly assured them that he only had pneumonia and would recover soon, aware that revealing the real diagnosis would devastate the girls. Matthew chose to protect them. However, with the clock ticking towards a possible demise, Matthew began earnestly searching for a kidney donor. That he first approached his mother, Beatrice, asking if she would consider donating a kidney to save his life. Unfortunately, she outrightly refused. Undeterred, Matthew turned to his 5 siblings, one after another, with the same request. Regrettably, all of them politely declined. Matthew exhausted all options, reaching out to every known relative, but to no avail. A month later, as Matthew's condition deteriorated, he realized that he was running out of time. Facing the harsh reality predicted by the doctors, Matthew had no choice but to tell his girls the truth. He called Aminata one day and asked her to come to the hospital, where he finally opened up to her, disclosing everything about his sickness. "But you should have just told us the truth initially," Aminata said to Matthew amidst tears. Matthew was about to say something, but Aminata cut him short and immediately offered to donate a kidney to him. Touched by her selfless gesture, Matthew agreed. The tests confirmed that Aminata was a match. And just 5 days later, she donated her kidney to Matthew in a successful transplant. Matthew's recovery was swift. And within barely a month, he was fully recovered and discharged from the hospital. Upon his return home, Matthew was greeted with a lavish welcome party organized by his 6 girls, their partners, kids, friends, and neighbors. Overwhelmed with happiness, Matthew felt the warmth of the love surrounding him. However, the surprises for their beloved adoptive dad didn't end there. A week before Matthew's 50th birthday, barely 3 months after his discharge from the hospital, the girls presented him with flight tickets to Africa. They instructed him to prepare for a week-long birthday vacation in his beloved Africa. Delighted at the prospect of returning to Africa, Matthew eagerly anticipated the trip, though the girls kept the destination a secret. Imagine Matthew's joy when, on the day of his 50th birthday, their plane landed in the very same airport where he had arrived almost 20 years ago for his remarkable first mission to Africa. The country had since experienced peace after the Civil War. and everything looked significantly changed. The trip became a heartwarming reunion with the place that held special memories for Matthew. The girls took Matthew to the camp where he had rescued them from the gutters. And to his amazement, the camp had transformed into a sprawling village. On the last day of his vacation, they led him to a newly built modern orphanage. Aminata proudly revealed that they had been working on constructing the orphanage over the past 3 years for him. The goal was to enable Matthew to live his lifelong dream of a quiet retirement in Africa. Devoted to taking care of orphans while the 6 girls couldn't continue funding the orphanage themselves. They had provided the foundation for Matthew to pursue his passion. Aminata handed Matthew the keys to the orphanage. And the girls announced their thoughtful gift. Matthew was initially speechless. Unable to believe the magnitude of their gesture. Overwhelmed with emotion. He embraced his beloved girls. Realizing that they had fulfilled his lifelong dream, the 7 of them stood there, locked in a tight embrace, savoring the profound moment. Matthew had often shared his dream of retiring in Africa and owning an orphanage with his girls. Now, they had made it a reality. The story reflects the power of kindness. As Matthew's decision to adopt the 6 girls had not only transformed their lives but had also come full circle to fulfill his own dreams. What do you think about Matthew's decision to adopt the 6 girls? That's all for today's story. If you like it, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. See you next time.